Hello and welcome to the interview on France24. My guest is one of the greatest American photographers. He featured world's leading personalities in music, entertainment, fashion, and politics. Her book was just released, which shows a selection of 30 years of his work. Mark Seliger is my guest. Hello and welcome to the show. Thank you for being with us.
So good to be here.
30 years. That's how many years you've been photographing celebrities such as Barack Obama, Kurt Cobain, Leonardo DiCaprio, Patti Smith. 168 pictures were selected. How did you choose the photographs?
Well, that's a big chore. We at the studio, we take all the images and we lay them out on the studio floor that we have edited down to 300-400 pictures. And from there, I work with an art director, and we just pick and choose. And then he takes them home and pairs them together and sees how the pagination is going to go, and the sequencing. And
Was it difficult?
Difficult, yeah. And something that we learned was in a 30-year book, you want the people to hold up as well as the images. So that was a big choice too, making sure that, if they were celebrities, that they were going to be people that have been around for a while and hopefully we're going to last.
Do you think, as your friend and photographer Lai Lovett, the whole idea is to tell the truth? There's beauty in truth. Is that what you're trying to achieve as a photographer?
I think there is a kind of a protocol as a photographer to share your vision, and also in some way throughout that vision, be sympathetic to the essence of who that person is as well, so that it's not just your take on it, but it's also who they are.
You started actually photography in Texas, where you were born and raised, and you moved to New York, where you worked for Rolling Stone. How did you meet with photography, Mark, and how did you choose to do portraits?
Well, photography started out for me in Texas as a teenager, and I quickly learned to love being in the darkroom. So that was the essence of it for me. That was the purest form, which was the print, tactile experience.
150 covers of Rolling Stone. You worked for Vanity Fair, JQ, Vogue. How do you actually shoot celebrities? How do you get prepared? What's so special about it?
Well, every assignment is different. And some assignments are very conceptual. So you can come up with a list of ideas. Sometimes you take the opposite of who they are, and sometimes you just extract who they are. Make two lists, cut them down, and then you pick a couple of them, and then those are the concepts. And then, of course, you have to also have, the willingness of your subject.
Right. Do you ask them to do things, for example?
More often than not, you'll have a discussion with somebody about what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do. And that's fine too, because it's really about this collaboration. I remember one shoot where I was photographing the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I had this idea to photograph them all painted in red, their entire bodies, and to have a little smoke coming out of their mouth as a red hot chili. And I explained this to the band, and the band was not going to do it. And Flea said, "Let me try." And we did half of his face in red. And he looked at it and he said, "Okay, we're not doing this."
No.
So
what did you do?
We photographed them naked.
Okay, that
was their decision.
Why Kurt Cobain on the front page of the book?
Well, one of the things that came about in doing this 30-year book was, not only did we have this kind of library of images that had been published, but I also had the ability to go back into my archives and pull images that had never been seen before. And this was a photograph that we did the last session with Nirvana, and this picture had never been used before. So throughout the book, there are moments where we're taking old sessions and finding new images that had never been really published before. So that was a really, it was a great experience for me to be able to do that, suss it out.
What would you call charisma, Mark?
Charisma is, I think, the light in somebody's eyes and their personality. It's it's interesting because I think a lot of people have difficulty having their picture taken. And what I think I do very well is get people to be comfortable so that they have the opportunity to be who they are. And sometimes
that's key,
it's
right?
sometimes it's sullen, sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's just very, quiet. But a portrait has the ability to move in any direction that is foreseen.
You shot Barack Obama in 2010. You took a picture from the back. How did this happen?
Well, this was an idea I had for the president, where I was going to photograph him as a diptych. So we were in the Rose Garden. We had all these people from Rolling Stone, and of course the White House staff was all there watching as we were doing this. And I went up to him very quietly and I said, "Mr. President, I'd like to photograph you from the front and from the back as a diptych." And he said, "Okay." And as we were shooting, I was looking around. I could see everybody was getting a little bit nervous, but I was photographing the back of him. And I was explaining him to put his hands in his pockets. I was balancing him out so that I got the perfect composition. And after a few frames, he stops and he goes, "Wait, is this going to make my ears look big?" And I said, "Absolutely not." And he stopped for a second. He said, "All right, enough art."
How many minutes?
About 30 seconds. So
That's short.
when you're working with a celebrity or you're working with a public figure that has a very limited amount of time, for instance, when you're photographing the President of the United States, you typically have between 6 and 8 minutes to do the picture. And that's usually 2 or 3 photographs. So you're doing a cover and then you're also doing a couple of inside pictures. So I do all my prep work before I go to a shoot in order to be able to have.
And you're super well prepared when you arrive.
Yeah, you have to be able to move through the shoot pretty quickly and confidently.
You're also a musician. You created a band, Rusty Truck. What's the bridge between music and photography?
Well, what I learned about songwriting is that songwriting is obviously storytelling. And as a visual artist, primarily a visual artist, I had all these images within my imagination to be able to pull from in order to be able to write songs. And once I started to write songs, it really became an infectious experience and a great balance. And I think that, you never really sign up to do one thing in life. And what's wonderful about being an artist is that you have a lot of support to be able to try many different things and use different paintbrushes for different parts of your personality.
You're very close friend with Lenny Kravitz. You shot a very sexy picture of him. He's dancing naked. What's the story?
Well,
it was shot in the Bahamas, right?
This was actually the first time I had worked with Lenny after about a 10-year break. And he invited me to come to the Bahamas and photograph him while he was making the record 5. And I was very, grateful to be able to have this experience and flattered to be able to work with him again. And we really nestled into a friendship over that period of time of just taking pictures and moving around. And this was one of the last photographs we did from the session. And I just said, "I want to shoot you very raw, very real on the beach." Obviously he was very comfortable with doing that. And if I had a 6-pack like that, I would never wear a shirt. So that's probably an 8-pack actually. But Lenny is a person that, and I call him a friend, and that doesn't happen too often in the relationships that you deal with when you're working with people. But Lenny's a friend, and he's somebody that we both have shared the passion for music and photography, and he's an excellent photographer. He just published a book a couple of years ago, and he's really a curious soul. And I think for an artist, that has to be the number one priority, is curiosity. That keeps you continually doing good work and being excited about the next thing that comes along.
Besides celebrities, Mark, there are other subjects in the book. This picture, Greek Jews at the Gathering of Survivors, is a picture of Holocaust survivors. So how did you pick this subject and how did you work on it?
Well, this was a really interesting experience for me. It was my first book that I ever published. And I was working with a wonderful writer, Lior Khan, and we basically had to collect 50 survivors and draw on their stories and do portraits within a very short period of time. And one of the experiences was at a synagogue, which was mainly Greek survivors. There was a community there. And when I was talking with them, I noticed that they all were tattooed, and I felt like that was a different approach photographically than I had done previously with some of the other survivors. And since there were so many of them there, it made a lot of sense. The first experience I ever had meeting a survivor was in Houston, Texas, and I went to a little Jewish bakery, and it was called Three Brothers Bakery, and there were 3 owners, all brothers, named the Juckers, and they had all served time in camps. And I remember as they were handing us our bagels or challah or rye bread, I could see the tattoos on their arms, and it was a very melancholy experience to see that. It was shocking to me.
What's next for you, Mark Seliger?
Right now, I'm working on a series of motion images that last 1 minute long, and it's all built around the concept of isolation. And that's what I'm working on.
Thank you, Mark Seliger. Once again, your book, 30 years of your work. There's also an exhibition in Paris at the A.galerie, the gallery of Arnaud Adida, until November 3rd. Thank you for watching the program, and stay with us on France24.
Armed militias have taken over entire parts of Rio de Janeiro. These paramilitary groups are at times affiliated with gangsters, drug traffickers, police officers or politicians. All of them use terror to bend local citizens and businesses to their will. Resisting them can have lethal consequences. Our reporters met up with some of the only commissioners, reporters and victims who dare to speak out against the militia's hold on their city.
Reporters on France 24 and France24.com.